Welcome, Peter.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. I'll let you tell how we know each other, if you would, and tell me where you're calling in from.
All right. Well, I'm calling in from my home, my bedroom in Redwood City, California. Terry and I have technically known each other for 17 years. We first met when her son Roshan was in kindergarten at the school where I was a teaching assistant and elective teacher for years. I taught her son directly as his first grade teaching assistant, and I also taught him geography in the years that followed. Terry has always been a tremendously supportive parent, and that means the world to myself and all other teachers. And Roshan was a pleasure to work with. He was very attentive, polite, hardworking. I'm thrilled to hear that he's so successful today, and I'm equally thrilled that Terry invited me to be on her program.
Oh, welcome. It's so exciting to be with you, Peter. Thanks for saying yes. Okay, so we're going to
You.
jump right in, and I'll share with you a quote that actually inspired me probably 15 years ago, and thusly I bring it to you today. What is it like for a boy to come to life in a woman's body, to know an infant's extraordinary fusion and identification with his mother, and then have to define himself as man? One part. Um, do sons internalize mother's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions about men and maleness? Okay, so we have a two-part.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Sure. Well, even though I don't recall having actually been in the womb at the same time, no, the phrase that we all come from a woman is quite true because it's a child. And, obviously oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I just stopped to get a little balance with the video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so the idea that we all come from a woman, of course, we come from a man as well, but the mother's the one who carries the child. You know, uh, when the child is inside the mother for 9 months, everything from the umbilical cord to the growing of the fetus to the fetus itself moving around inside is really the physical foundation for the soon to be newborn baby. And then once the baby is able to hear, the mother's voice or other people's voices that are recognizable, such as the father's or maybe even the older siblings, if the baby is a second born, that is really key because then the baby gets a sense like, okay, this is likely the world I'll be coming into when I'm ready to enter. And also, in terms of boys specifically, here's where it gets very interesting. Knowing that for mothers, every single egg contains only an X chromosome, but for fathers, the sperm contains an X or a Y chromosome. So if a baby is born a boy, it's all due to the father and his Y chromosome, because if the father gives the X chromosome, then the baby's going to be born a girl. So it's interesting that the mother just chromosomally and genetically has that X ready, but not the Y, whereas the father has the Y. So if the Y is not present, boyhood is obsolete. Uh, and also, I hope this isn't too graphic for your viewers, but I did some research and learned that when the baby is going to be born a boy, the testicles do not drop down until after 8 weeks. So it's really toward the end of the birth cycle when the baby is going to be determined to be a boy. Whereas up until then, the chances are slightly larger it's going to be born a girl, again, because of the probability of having two X chromosomes, one from the mother, one from the father. But then, of course, scientific theories and all that aside, there are theories that say, when all those millions of sperm are racing to fertilize that egg, that the Y chromosome sperm is faster in speed, but the X chromosome is overall stronger. So, that says a lot. Do you want a baby that's born quicker, or do you want a baby that's born stronger? And of course, those are all in quotes because, anyone can be born a certain way. But I think that lays certainly the physical,
Mhm.
biological foundation. And then after the baby is born, well, though now it's very different with the world of two-income households and mothers working on the job just as much as fathers, sadly not getting paid as much, but that's a whole nother issue. So the baby is essentially lucky if they can see the mother or the father on a regular basis outside of the jobs. So I would say when it comes to laying the foundation for boys and motherhood, well, knowing that the mother is initially the primary parent, the mother's the one who breastfeeds the baby, the mother's the one who carries the baby, and the mother's life is forever altered by the baby, both biologically and routinely, habitually down the line. It's not a lot to do with that. And also, even though children are not aware of this until a little ways down the line, the fact that a boy baby has his mother as his first role model, and his mother happens to be the opposite sex. So the boy baby learns a lot about the world through his mother. And, in terms of instilling masculinity and maleness, well, I would say the most enlightened mothers out there is to allow boys to be themselves, who are able to appreciate boys for who they are, who are able to really understand where boys come from psychologically, physiologically, and, of course, instill good moral values, but not try and turn the boy into somebody else, i.e., not try and feminize the boy, not try and, neuter the boy, meaning, turn him into a different type of person that he's not. So that is a huge weight of responsibility on the mother. And then that's where the father comes in. It's like, okay, well, this boy, just like if he were a girl, needs an even balance. They need a good female role model and a good male role model. So unless one of the parents has physically died or taken off, all that pressure is there. And of course, that goes for both genders. But
Mhm.
yeah, for boys, knowing that the mother is his primary role model, he needs to feel like he can be comfortable in his own skin. And the mother needs to understand that she too needs to make him feel comfortable in his own skin while still instilling level headedness and good moral values and a good
Mm.
work ethic and treating people well. So it's a huge job. But as long as masculinity is embraced by the mother, once she becomes the caretaker of his son, then the son can feel at ease and he won't be resentful. He will definitely get a good first impression of the opposite sex from his mother. And that's a huge
Mhm.
responsibility. What's so
Yeah.
interesting is that when we think about children of either primary gender and their relationships with the parent of the opposite sex, we hear from the other side of the fence, daddy's girls, or, how the father is so important to the daughter because if he messes up, he destroys the daughter's impressions of men from that point forward.
Mm.
And it's really extreme. For mothers and sons, it's different. Obviously, the mother can also lay the foundation for the son's impressions of the opposite sex, short and long term. But it's different, unless the mother just doesn't have her act together and is abusive to the son, then typically the mother-son bond is pretty strong, and the mother wants the son to succeed and feel good about himself.
Mhm.
She can be very protective of the son, and that can work in both directions. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's the long
Okay.
short of it.
Yes, yes. And then I'm going to ask you personally,
Hmm.
if you have any examples of, your sense of your relationship with your mother, whatever you're comfortable, just that individuating or not, the support for it, the honoring of your maleness, etc. Do you have anything personally that you could share?
Sure. Well, I will be honest. My mother and I have had a back and forth relationship throughout much of my life. When I was 10 and my younger brother was 6, our parents divorced. So from that point forward, my mother became a single mother, and I lived at home until I was 25, even though I also lived on campus at college. My younger brother still lives at home, but that's perfectly all right. So, from that point forward, my mother's and my relationship changed because she started expecting more of me and she
Mm.
started challenging me a lot more. And, obviously, her and my dad's relationship was not great. And I've heard both sides of the story countless times. And I just reached the conclusion like, yes, I get it. You two were not meant for each other. And, you got your wish, you got married, and you had two children who turned out pretty well, I must say. Um, but yeah, once my mother became a single mother, the timing was interesting because 1 year before she and my dad divorced, she had become a teacher herself. And, prior to that, up until I was 8 years old and my brother was four, she was a stay-at-home mother.
Mm.
So that relationship changed once she started to work professionally. But yeah, as a single mother, she had to toughen up, and she's always been very tough. She's,
Mhm.
solid as a rock. And yet, after the divorce, our relationship changed because she started to expect more of me.
Like, can you tell us what things you were expected that were different, Peter?
Well, I was just really expected to grow up more quickly.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she started to test the waters quite a bit with me and expect more of me as, a 10-year-old.
meaning responsibilities around the house, or like, were they unreasonable expectations from your perspective, or?
Uh, yeah, not just household responsibilities, but also I had to develop a lot of patience and tolerance. She had a full plate, but also she really started to challenge me a lot more, as if to say, like, well, Peter, what can you do that doesn't need my help? Or do you think you could do something on your own without me helping you? But these were like brand new things that I was learning in life. They weren't things that I already learned or should have known. So it became, quite a bit of a tug of war and back and forth. And,
Mhm.
it
When you look
caused our
back
relationship.
at that, Peter, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you look back at that now, what do you feel about that? Was that
Well, yeah,
good,
well,
bad, for you today, or?
yeah, no, I mean, it certainly toughened me up and it did prepare me for the real world. And I still, to this day, salute my mother for having been able to be a single parent on a very slim teacher's income. She raised both my brother and I largely single-handedly, even though we did see our father once a week, on weekends and also during seasonal breaks, because he still lived relatively locally in the Bay Area. So our relationship as father and son certainly didn't disappear. Uh, but yeah, no, I mean, because my mother and I have often had personality clashes and differences of opinion, sometimes I feel like I've been able to handle that a little more maturely than her, but
Mm,
we can get into that later.
yeah.
So,
How could it have been different for you, do you think?
but I mean, certainly, I would have preferred that my parents had stayed married at least until my brother and I were adults. But as a kid, you have no control over that. If a parent's marriage, namely your parents' marriage, just isn't working, and they divorce because they can't keep it together, and or they don't want their children to see them constantly arguing and fighting, that is key, very key. Um, and of course, both of my parents, I saw their good sides and their bad sides, and I could
Mhm.
see why the marriage didn't work out.
Mhm.
Thankfully, their love for my brother and I was unwavering, but yeah,
Yeah, that's good. So when you think about that fusion, with however you might describe it, with your mother, through all of these ups and downs and things going on in your family, um, choosing, I guess, is it choosing manhood? It's not choosing, defining oneself as a man. Can you speak to that more personally? Do you have
sure.
something to share?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say, whether a son has his father around full time or not, and whether he's Mr. Popular, whether he has a big social circle of guy friends, a lot of boys go sometimes their whole lives not really knowing what it means to be a man.
Now, wait,
And
are you talking about you? I want to, because I really want to hear about you. Is this you
just
you're talking about?
yeah, me and in general, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, I appreciate you wanting me to stay on topic. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, you're the topic here.
Okay. For me, yeah. One thing I definitely struggled with as a kid is that I was always very much a gentle soul. I was the sensitive type. I was bullied for about half of my childhood. It really left scars on me. I was bullied by other boys for, being too timid or not being popular. The biggest challenge with that is that right before my parents divorced, they transferred me to another school. So I had to juggle adjusting to a new school in every which way and adjusting to my new domestic life with divorced parents. That was a huge burden, and I don't think any child should ever be put in that situation.
Mm.
Challenges do happen, life is unpredictable, but don't dump that on a kid all at once. That's way too much.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, as for my own masculinity and manhood, well, I did question it at times because I was just like, I obviously can't get through to my male peers. There's conflicts of interest, there's conflicts of maturity. When I would see all these immature boys in my midst who were not only bullying me, but also who were popular, like with the girls down the line, or if the teachers and school administrators weren't disciplining them, and if their own parents, especially during the bullying years, when confronted, weren't disciplining their sons, I'm thinking like, what the heck is this all about? So basically, if you're a male and you're immature, you get the praise. Oh no, no, we can't have that. And then the mature, sensitive types get totally overlooked. We're considered weak. We can, we some people do say like, oh, you're so much like a woman in your way, and that's very condescending, of course, to girls and women. But no, I struggled with that a lot, even up through college. And I just couldn't figure it out because obviously my own dad was very sensitive, and it worked for him though. But yeah, a lot of my male peers, quite frankly, were jerks.
Yeah, and so let me just I'm riffing here, but like, so you look at them and go, I don't want that.
Exactly. I was like, I don't want that male identity. I need to give myself and the whole male gender a good name, and thankfully I had other good male role models growing up, like male teachers who inspired me to go into teaching. My favorite music, as Roshan can definitely attest to this, is music from the 1960s. And that music was largely written by sensitive males who really, were able to find ways to express themselves artistically. And I looked up to those men. I'm like, these men who people should be like,
Give me
maybe
some
not.
names. Give me a couple of names, Peter.
Sure. Oh, gladly. Yeah. Peter Yarrow and Paul Stuckey of Peter, Paul and Mary. Paul Simon, Art Garfunkel of Simon and Garfunkel, Roger McGuinn of the Byrds, Pete Townsend of the Who, yes, New Age Arts, Yanni, yeah.
Wow. Okay. What about, did you have other inspiring men models when you were growing up besides the teachers and these artists?
Yeah,
Like family members
sure. Well, I mean, my father for sure inspired me, both up close and from a distance. Another person who sadly became a widower 2 years ago when my aunt died is my maternal uncle, because he too grew up a very sensitive boy. He was very much like my maternal grandmother, who I sadly never got to meet because she died before I was born. But when I learn about her, mainly through my mom, I'm like, oh, my uncle is totally like her. Has her looks, has her personality. Yet my grandfather tormented my uncle because he was not like that. He did not consider my uncle to be a real man. And he bullied my uncle. And, my grandfather on my mom's side was an utter narcissist. It was terrible. And even my mom and my biological aunt suffered under that narcissism, though he was a hardworking person, of course, to support a family of 5. But yeah,
Mhm.
when I have learned that about my uncle, I'm like, God, that is just terrible. My uncle is one of the most wonderful, sincere, hardworking people, and his own father trashed him because of that. That is
Mhm.
full,
Mm.
you
So,
know?
Peter, how do you, or in what way did you embrace your masculinity with all of that confusion? I guess could be a good word.
Yeah. Well, I just stayed true to myself. I knew I didn't want to become like these other guys who were selfish or who were immature or who did mistreat women, or who were all about guns and violence. Because my brother and I were raised to steer clear of video games. We never played video games growing up unless we were over at a friend's house and played theirs. So that definitely shaped our minds to be a lot more creative and artistic, and deep and thoughtful, you
Mhm.
know, which of course doesn't really blend well with the average American anymore, or with the average male at that. But
Mm.
no, though I questioned sometimes, I knew I wasn't the typical male, but no, I've just really made it my life's mission to be a good male role model, especially to children, to be a devoted boyfriend to my girlfriend, to be a good son, which I always have been, and to be proud of myself internally and externally.
Just the way you are.
Well, thank you.
Oh, that's great. Gosh, I so appreciate your thoughts. Is there anything else that you feel that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah. Well, I remember, yeah, at the beginning of our video here when I was mentioning, like, about feminizing boys and all that. Here's one other reason I went into teaching. So, my number one teaching role model was my fifth grade teacher. I'm still in touch with him to this day. He's retired, and I last visited him at the same school where I attended 6 years ago. Yeah, and I dedicated my third published book to him. Yeah, I've written and published three books and currently working on my fourth. Uh,
Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you. So, one reason I became a teacher is because I knew that kids needed good male role models in the academic world, particularly in the elementary education levels. And, obviously that worked for me because I've had a very successful and productive teaching career. But I did have to fight a lot to make my voice heard, particularly at St. John's.
Mm.
And, because there are some elementary school teachers who happen to be women who really actually don't like men. They either have
Mm.
had bad relationships with men for whatever reason. Some elementary school teachers don't really like boys either, and it's very apparent. And that's not fair to boys. It's like it's not a boy's fault that he's a boy and he has to go to school. That still is a hot topic of debate about why boys going all the way up the academic ladder are still not as heavily supported as girls are.
Mm.
And, boys just naturally don't develop as quickly as girls do. And the boys are blamed for it. And it's like, well, no, you can't blame a boy for not developing as quickly. And if academic curricula and school routines and philosophies and methodologies are really centered around girls, it's like, well, then you're almost setting the boys up for failure.
Mm.
And, so they need good male role models to feel like they're a part of things and that other
Yes.
people learn and think like them. But at the same time, as we all know, there are not many male teachers out there, apart from the very low pay and public disrespect. One other reason there aren't too many male teachers is because a lot of men are very defamed by some of their female colleagues, especially if the female colleagues happen to be their supervisors. They will say, like, oh, no, don't teach like that, or don't talk
Mm.
like that. And it's like, let me guess, you want me to be and talk like a woman. Is that right?
Ah,
Is
interesting.
that right? And naturally men get angry. And there are really a lot of good men in teaching who are good male role models, who are the more sensitive type. Again, money and all that aside, if a man wants to be a teacher, of course, he shouldn't just be handed the role, but it's like I would say he should be encouraged. I would say when boys are doing well in school, they should be encouraged. But a lot of boys feel very insecure in school because it's not designed for boys. It's not really, revolving around their needs a whole lot.
Mhm.
Now, I've worked, certainly since leaving St. John's, I've worked in all different types of schools, including all boys schools and all girls schools. And that's what I really wrote my third book about. Is I wrote about all these different types of schools I attended growing up and worked in as a teacher.
Oh,
The
wow.
book was written in 2018, so time has moved forward since then.
Right.
But
We'll put those in the notes because I'd like, if you'd like. Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All three of my published books are available on Amazon, and I
Great.
also have a YouTube channel of my own. So
Great. We'll put that into nice.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
this is so good. Wow, wow. Thought provoking. Very, well, you pushed some buttons, I think, today, Peter. It's good.
Well, my mind is always active. I'll tell you that.
I
So
can say that.
yeah.
Wow, so nice having you here. So grateful. And just thank you for your freshness and your availability and honesty. And thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Terry. Thank you too. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for your ongoing support.
Oh, you're welcome.